Hello. Hello.
This thing, and I mean extraordinary professional development activities. And I can definitely say that in this thing now, I want to thank the past president Kannan Sundanam, who really made not only Chennai chapter, across India chapter, he created a model which works in India. Otherwise, as IIBA was struggling to build the constitutions and the momentum, it is Kannan Sundanam who started that. And then IIBA, after Chennai chapter, become a chartered chapter. And IIBA Hyderabad chapter also immediately become a chartered chapter. And now the momentum is happening. And I thank Madhavan, Ashok, Prashantini, and all the board of directors who is really creating this particular professional development, and the contribution to the community is phenomenal. I hope this will continue. Over to you, Madhavan. Madhavan, congrats to you for a great leadership. Over to you, Madhavan.
Yeah, thank you, Swami sir. So hope I am audible.
You are.
Okay, right. Yeah, it's been a very challenging journey, as Swami sir mentioned. So under the leadership of Mr. Kannan Santanam, I remember we started this as a very small group way back in 2012, and then having this kind of progress, it's been outstanding. So I really thank everyone, Ashok, Deepa, all were Samina, all were part of this group for a long period of time. So as Swami sir said, we are really gaining momentum, and we hope to contribute to the community. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Deepa Sendilrajan, Vice President Marketing and Communications in India, IABA Chennai chapter. Today, our speaker is Ms. Prashantini Kalyanasundaram. She is a certified business analysis professional. She is also a certified agile practitioner and enterprise and architect. She has over 16 years of professional experience serving various roles, including data analyst, project manager, and agile business analyst. She is now a business architect contributing to digital strategy and innovation institutes for ICON, a clinical research company. She joined IABA as a study group participant in 2017 and has been actively contributing to the chapter since then. She took a role in the board early this year as Vice President membership. Over to you, Prashantini.
Thank you, Deepa. And good evening, everybody, and good morning for those who are joining from the other side of the world. Thank you for investing your time with us today. The topic for today's discussion is unearthing personal knowledge dynamics in agile analysis. While I have emphasized how knowledge management plays an important role for an agile practitioner, I've also designed the content of this webinar in such a way that whatever is your field of study or nature of profession, you will still find this relevant and have some interesting takeaways by the end. Let's quickly go over some housekeeping rules before we begin. You will all be in mute, so chat is your go-to place for communicating with us. The last 10 minutes is reserved for Q&A, but you can post your questions in the chat window all along, and Deepa will bring them to me at the end. If we run out of time and not able to address your question, you will have my contact details also posted in the chat window, so you can bring your questions to me offline and I will circle them back to you. In case of any technical glitches or connectivity issues from my end, I have a backup, so just be patient and hang on. I will resume back immediately. And in case of any technical glitches in your end, again, not to worry because we are having this recorded. The recording link will be made available in chennai.iiba.org and will also be posted to all the WhatsApp community groups. So I think before we get into the agenda, I thought I will start with a story. Somehow my slideshow is not working. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So this little girl you see here is Tilly Smith. She's 10 years old and comes from UK. And for the context of this story, spending her Christmas vacation in a beach in Phuket, Thailand. It was the early hours of the Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, and after playing with her sister for a while, Tilly takes a walk alongside the beach. And suddenly she runs back to her parents, gasping her breath and screaming, "We need to leave back to the hotel immediately. Something is wrong." Her parents calmed her, and then she would explain that she notices sea is being fizzy, the wave patterns are unusual, and there is a froth on top of all the receding waves. She remembers from her geography class a couple of weeks ago that these could be signs of tsunami and was able to make that connection. Luckily, her parents decided to believe her and took immediate action. They informed the local guards, and very soon the entire Macau beach in Phuket, Thailand was evacuated. In fact, it was the fateful day of tsunami back in 2004 where we lost thousands and thousands of life in Southeast Asia. But this beach survived, everyone in this beach survived, only because Tilly Smith rightly used the knowledge that she had. Now, this is an exceptional story, but if you relate, we all have such mini tsunamis crossing our personal and professional lives time and again. And if we are empowered with knowledge that we can rightly put to use, we not just survive that moment, but also emerge as a more stronger and successful person. So, to bring that story to closure, Tilly Smith from then is dearly called as the angel of the beach. And in the second pic, you see Tilly Smith again visiting the same spot, same beach after 10 years with her mom to remember the most unforgettable moment of her life. So, the moral of the story is we say knowledge is power, but the real power is making use of that knowledge wisely. And that exactly is the context of personal knowledge management. So, with that moral, I think we'll move on to the agenda. So, the next 50 minutes is going to be packaged with something like this. What is personal knowledge management? We'll understand the term. And I'm going to give you one convincing reason why personal knowledge management is relevant to all of us. We will move on to look at two discrete dimensions of knowledge, which will enable us to explore the three levels or three generations of knowledge management. Alongside, when I describe the different levels of knowledge management, I'm going to give you some practical tips and techniques that you can take away. Okay, so what is personal knowledge management? The term personal here indicates two things. First is you are responsible for your own learning and growth. It's your knowledge, it's how you gather it, and it's up to you to take care of it. So you're accountable for your knowledge creation. And it is a personalized approach. There is no one size fit all approach for this. There are several references, several guidances and frameworks available, but it is up to you to design your own personal knowledge management system, fine tune it and make it work for you. So that is the reason it is called as personal. If you go to the reminder part of the term, knowledge management. So generally, if you go Google knowledge management, it is always going to point you to an IT system in an organization where all the knowledge assets are aggregated so that it aids in decision making. So the same thing applies for personal knowledge management also. So it is a process of capturing, distributing, and effectively using the knowledge. So together, personal knowledge management is an individual's system or process for capturing, distributing, and effectively using the knowledge. All right, so we'll take that definition and move on to understand why it is relevant. I think the very definition gives us some perspective, but I thought I'll give you one more very convincing reason. So there is a research that says within 1 hour, if you don't do anything with the new information that you've gained, 50% of it is lost. 1 hour, 50% is gone. After 24 hours, it raises to 70%, and in a week, almost 90% is lost. When I read this research, when I read about this, it was quite alarming for me. We are all spending precious time in earning knowledge. We are listening to classes, we are sitting in webinars. So much of precious time that we are putting in to gain knowledge, and if it is all evaporated in a week's time, then it is not working in our favor. So we better have something in place that is going to help us to capture all this knowledge assets and enable us to make best advantage of it. From a business analyst with an agile mindset perspective, I think there is enough and more emphasis in our agile extension guide about continuous learning, faster decision making, and maximizing value creation. In fact, there is a quote in agile analysis extension guide: do less and do right things right. I think knowledge management is the backbone of that. There is also a small methodology or framework given there for agile practitioners: discover, interpret, and communicate. This is very similar to one of the personal knowledge management framework called seek, sense, and share. So I thought these are very closely associated, just the terminologies are different. So that's the reason why for an agile BA, PKM is even more important. So now to two discrete dimensions of knowledge. There are various types of knowledge. In fact, we will touch them on in the later slides, but I'm going to give you two fundamental categories of knowledge. The first one is explicit knowledge, and the second one is tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is the know what knowledge, any fact-based knowledge. Whatever you're able to read from a book, listen from a podcast or an audio, look from a video and understand, all those are explicit knowledge. They can be verbalized, they can be documented easily, and that is the reason why it can be transferred easily from one person to another. On the other hand, tacit knowledge is the know-how knowledge. This is very hard to verbalize and it cannot be documented easily, and that is the reason why transferring from one person to another person is difficult. I'm not saying it is impossible. It has to take, you have to spend considerable time and effort before you can gain a tacit knowledge. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples to understand tacit knowledge better. The first one is facial recognition. Supposing you're looking at a person whom you are familiar with already, you can immediately recognize the face and call them by their name. But if I ask you, how do you describe or how do you recognize that face, you may not be able to put that in words. So because that sits in your tacit knowledge space. And assume you're sitting in a driving instruction, you're sitting with a driving instructor in a driving class. He is giving you some instructions verbally as to how to apply, change gear, or take a break in a slope. You might not be comfortable in trying that out on the road. So he has to perform that to you several times before you're observing that and gaining some confidence. And then you will have to play around that technique for some time before you get the real confidence of trying that out in the road. So what he's trying to transfer there to you is tacit knowledge. One more example. This is a recipe that I have got from my grandmother. Somehow I take all the measurements intact, exactly that like she says, and I'm using the instructions that she gave me exactly, but that taste wouldn't come. Only after several iterations of me cooking that recipe and she's standing by me, giving me here and there some tips and tricks, I get closer to the taste that she brings in that recipe. So what she's giving me there is tacit knowledge. So I think I've given you enough examples about tacit knowledge. Why? Because we emphasize too much on explicit knowledge, but deep within, all our knowledge is rooted in tacit knowledge. For us to be awakened or appreciative about that concept is the very beginning of knowledge management. Okay, so now we move on to the three levels of knowledge management. There are a lot of pioneers in knowledge management theories and knowledge creation space, but two Japanese people called Nonaka and Takuchi, they are kind of masters in this area, and they have kind of framed up three generations in knowledge management. So the first generation is very primitive. It talks only about storage and retrieval of information. So when we talk about storage, it is already explicit, right? I said only explicit knowledge can be stored, can be documented. So we are only focusing on the storage of information or explicit knowledge storage and retrieval. And as we progress, as we move on to the second generation, we understand the importance of social interactions, more of community and network building. Because only when we talk to like-minded people about the knowledge of interest, the more and more ideas we get about that knowledge. So we start to appreciate that, and that is the growth that knowledge management has taken. So in the second generation knowledge management, the focus is on the tacit knowledge outer path because you're talking and sharing experiences with people. The third generation of knowledge management is self-awareness, going within. How much it is important to talk to outside people to get knowledge, it is equally important that you get in and get self-awareness and be enlightened about the knowledge that you are creating. In fact, when you've reached this third generation, you are already reached the pinnacle or zenith of knowledge creation, and it is no longer called as personal knowledge management, it is called personal knowledge capital. The term capital means gaining value. So the idea here is when you have reached here, you have started gaining value out of the knowledge that you have gained. So in the first generation KM, I'm going to give you two aspects. The first aspect would be how you can leverage technology and create a digital library of your knowledge assets. And secondly, I will give you some ideas about improving your brain memory. And in the second generation, I'm going to introduce you to one of the frameworks that Nanoko and Takuchi paper covers called Seki model, which emphasizes on interactions between explicit and tacit knowledge. And in the third generation, again, I'm going to talk about few techniques that will help you to improve your self-awareness or gain control to your inner guidance system. All right, so we will move on. So the first generation is about the storage of knowledge assets, right? So I am a continuous learner, but before I knew anything about personal knowledge management, I used to have notes on my learnings everywhere, literally everywhere. My mobile phone, my diaries, my office and personal laptops, and even on the notepads that the conference or webinar sponsors provide. And I should admit, very rarely I take it back for my reference. I would have made lovely notes. I would have understood that these would add value and these are some things that I need to explore more. They would have given me some nice references, but somewhere all those notes are gone. They're as good as gone forever. I don't go back to them for reference. So the first step in organizing your knowledge management is bring all your knowledge assets together. The best part is you can leverage technology to do that for you. Use notes applications like Evernote, Google Keep, Microsoft OneNote, which gives you the flexibility of cloud storage, which means you can access it from anywhere. It gives you the flexibility of easy search and retrievability. You can do tagging. You can also share them. So there are a lot of features that these notes applications give you. So I learned my lesson. I went back hunting down, at least for the past 2 years, for all the webinars and all the classes that I've attended, wherever the notes were, I brought them all to Evernote, and I made specific folders and nicely curated them. So that is about the first step in organizing knowledge assets. The second step is curate. So you have to go back to these notes periodically to assess how much of them are still relevant, how much of them can still add value to your knowledge creation process, and then make decisions. So whatever doesn't look relevant anymore, just discard them, and whatever is valuable, find suitable homes, find suitable folders for them, and then park them nicely. So the third step then is to crunch. So this is where you're connecting the dots. This is where you're making the connections and you are making your own version of that knowledge. You're conceptualizing that knowledge and making your own version. The final step is contributing. So once you've crunched and mashed up the data and you've got some idea about the knowledge area that you've created, you're ready to contribute. So contribute is either you can start performing that as part of your work experience, or you can share or collaborate with people who will be influenced by that. So this is just one example of a knowledge creation or knowledge arrangement framework. There are a lot of things that are available from different people who have worked in this area. This one comes from cultivatedmanagement.com. I encourage you to go there, and Deepa can give you the link in chat window. So there, the author has a YouTube video where he explains each of these steps elaborately, and he gives you some examples of how he has done his notes app, how he has digitized his handwritten notes to the notes app and things like that. So that will be a good thing to watch out. We will move on to tip 2. So in this slide, we'll discuss about how we can improve our brain's memory. Like I said, as much as you maintain a digital library of your knowledge assets, it is equally important that you have right skills to retrieve and make use of it. So and that has to come from your brain's memory. Now, there's a question for the participants. Any idea how much information our brain can store? What is the brain's memory capacity? Can you type in your guesses in the chat window? I want to open up the chat. Okay, so our brain's storage capacity is virtually limitless. The good news is we will never run out of space. Still, if we have to give a number, the research says it is 2.5 million gigabytes, almost 600 million web pages is what we can store in our brain. So just like computers, your brain also has two types of memory. One is a fragile short-term memory and another one is the main memory, which is the long-term memory. So the long-term memory is characterized by storage strength, how deeply your memory is rooted, and retrieval strength, how quickly it can recall something to your surface of your mind. On a daily basis, whatever you are gathering, whatever information that comes to you, the books you read, the videos you watch, the conversations you have, all of them are getting into hippocampus or the fragile memory. And you have to deliberately ask your brain. So only by deliberately remembering something, what you have learned that day, you're sending a big signal to your brain to hold on to that information. You're sending a signal that this is something which is relevant for me, which is important for me. So please place it in the main memory. That instruction goes only when you remember it again. So the more you do this exercise, the lesser and lesser time. So the more signal the brain gets and the lesser time it takes to activate and retrieve that knowledge to the surface of your mind. So this is the basis of the first technique that we will see here called spaced repetition. Am I audible? It says my internet connection is unstable. Can someone confirm if you're still
Yes,
hearing me?
Prashantini, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is an evidence-based learning technique where you review the learning materials at regular intervals. Now, repeatedly encountering your learning materials at spaced intervals is more effective than reviewing the material multiple times in the same session. Why? Because it leverages a memory phenomenon called spacing effect in your brain. So it helps brain to learn better when we separate out information over time. Actually, this helps the new neural connections that are forming to solidify with the time effect or the time intervals that you are giving. So a simple way to follow spaced repetition is using flashcards. Flashcards in a box method. So you're all familiar with flashcards. So I'm going to add one more trick on top of that. So what you will do is assume you have 3 boxes, and for each box you're going to set a time interval. So the first box, maybe you will visit every 2 days. The second box, you will visit every 7 days. And maybe the third box, you will visit every 30 days. Now, when your flashcard deck is ready, you place them all in the first box, which means every 2 days, you will go to the flashcards and try to revise them. The more comfortable you are, those flashcards will go to the second box, which means you will revisit those flashcards only after 7 days. They are in the 7-day interval time. And then once you go to the 7th day, you go to the second box, and then maybe there are 10 flashcards there, and you try to recall them. 3 out of the 10 you are very comfortable. Those 3 cards will go to the third box, which means you will revisit those flashcards only in a month's time. So what we are doing is we are creating the spacing effect to our brain. So after a couple of weeks, all your cards will be in the third box, which means you have mastered whatever you wanted to achieve in that flashcard. So there are also softwares that can help you do this, create flashcards and set spaced intervals. I can give you 2 examples, Anki and Memorango app. I can ask Deepa to share the links with you in the chat window. So the second technique is 50-50 rule. This is very easy. Whatever you're doing as part of your knowledge creation, take 50% of the time in learning that and 50% of time in sharing or collaborating with that. Now, there's a quote from Adam, says the best way to learn something truly is to teach it, not just because explaining helps you to understand it, but also because retrieving it helps you to remember it. So you have two advantages. One is you get clarity around the knowledge area. Second, you're giving exercise to your brain to remember it or deep root it in your main memory. So 50-50 rule, suppose you're reading a book, halfway through, just stop it and see, talk to yourself, see if you can bring the summary to the surface of your mind before you go to the next half. The third one is topic demonstration. So understanding how something works will also improve your retention rate. We already saw about this. This is something similar to the tacit knowledge. So watch instructional videos or watch demonstrational videos or go to workplaces where people are actually doing that activity. So whatever you want to learn, assume you want to learn a new agile ceremony called sprint planning. So you're watching a video and then go to your office, sit in a scrum meeting and watch how sprint planning is done. So the more you watch about how something is done, the better you're able to understand or grasp the concepts and retain it in your memory. The final trick is sleep. Now, sleep is underrated, but it is very critical for memory creation and also to strengthen your storage capacity. Lots of neural connections are happening during your sleep, which will help to reinforce and refine the knowledge you've gained. So don't overstretch or kill your sleep time. Don't think because you can run for late hours and learn about something and excel the next day. No, sleep is as important as you spend time in learning something. That is why when important decisions have to be made, they say go sleep it over, right? So all the connections will happen only, the mind patterns will happen only in sleep. So 4 techniques to leverage the power of your brain memory: spaced repetition, 50-50 rule, topic demonstration, and sleep. So the first generation is over. Now we are slowly getting to the second generation, which is about tacit knowledge, outer path. We are going to talk about social interactions, power of being with like-minded people. Now Nonaka and Takuchi brought out this Seki model, where where slowly the realization of how much important interaction and network building was happening in the early years. And the Seki model has 4 quadrants: socialization, externalization, combination, and internalization. I'm going to give you an example to understand this better. So let's assume you're asked to write a business case for a new proposal. But for a fair understanding of what it is, you're not quite sure how to approach this. So the first step is you go talk to people in your office who have experience in this. Now they may give you some templates, some good pointers, and also about what your approval committee's expectations would be like, and some references. So that is the first step: socialization, sharing of experiences between individuals. So you talk to a couple of people and then you come back to your desk and you start making notes of that, right? So what you're doing there is you're articulating the tacit knowledge that you have gained into explicit knowledge. You've started documenting it, you've started verbalizing it, which means tacit is converted. External tacit, the tacit that you've got from social interactions, is being converted into a explicit knowledge. The third step is combining. So suppose you've talked to a few people and then you have all those notes in hand, you're putting them together, plus maybe you also have some knowledge about business case writing. So you're combining them you're combining all those knowledge together, and you're coming up with your own systemic knowledge system. So now you have an idea or a framework in your mind about how to approach business case writing. So that is what you're gained here, is systemic knowledge. Finally, you're going about writing a business case, right? So you have kind of learned the approach and you go about doing it actually for your business. For that proposal, you've started writing a business case. Now, initially, there might be some review comments here and there until you're really confident about that business case, but you've learned the technique, you have mastered the technique. So that is the final quadrant, internalization, learning by doing. So no longer business case writing is new to you. You have somehow mastered that learning. And there is a spiral in the middle to indicate that this is an evolving activity. So from socialization, you will externalize it and then combine it, and then you will internalize it for your own use. So to me, actually, this SECI model is not a framework or a methodology. It only helps you to understand how beautifully knowledge creation happens when you are naturally doing. I mean, we will all naturally follow a path like this. So just watch your journey. The more aware you are, the better it is. So that's why I wanted to just bring a SECI model and give you a understanding of how the whole knowledge creation process is when outer path of tacit knowledge is really appreciated. And that's why we urge you to become part of IABA community, and any community, whichever is your field of work or field of study. Just find out the community and be with like-minded people. So we move on to the final one. I think I'll finish. I can give you back some time. So the final third generation is about inner guidance system, right? So for many of us, tacit knowledge at the inner level is an untapped potential. Why? Knowing what knowledge we have is not easy. If somebody asks you what all you know and what all you don't know, can you explain that? It's very hard. But trust me, we always know more than what we can tell. You can call this as intuition, inner hunch, gut feel, self-awareness, knowingness. There are so many terms that denotes this. But for the context of this, I'm going to refer to this as inner guidance system. To simplify this concept, assume you have another person, let's call him Mr. X, inside of you who's more intelligent than you, and he knows all that you are accumulating as knowledge and even more. He can conceptualize and synthesize your knowledge very much better than you, and he might have answers to all your unresolved queries. Isn't that wonderful? So there is a person, there is a Mr. X in all of us. So the ask here is to make connection with that person and seek help with your knowledge creation. That is why it is reported that Nobel Prize winners use intuition as part of the knowledge creation and scientific discoveries. So best knowledge workers always use both their skill and intuition while evaluating options for their decision making. There are several ways of how you can tune into your inner guidance system. And this is quite an intensive topic by itself. So I'm just going to give you 4 techniques that I thought you can easily relate to and easily adapt to. The first one is self-evaluation or introspection. Knowingly or unknowingly, we all do this, especially in the moments when we are emotionally impacted. If you observe, we always ask why when we introspect ourselves. During our self-evaluation, we always start with why and try to dig for answers. Why did I not speak up in a meeting today? Why is my spouse always picking up a fight with me? But from a research that Tasha conducted before she wrote her book, Insight, a very detailed book on self-awareness, she observes that people who are really self-aware, she calls them as unicorns. So people who are really self-aware, they don't ask why, instead they ask what. Many times you don't get answers to why. In fact, why will drift you away from the problem. But instead, what will help you to react to the situation and resolve it? So let's go back to the examples I cited before. Instead of, why did I not speak up in the meeting today? Try asking, what should I do to speak up in the meeting tomorrow? Should I have some notes with me ready so that I can confidently talk about it? Or should I have a deck prepared so that I can flash it out and that will kind of support me if I have to speak out? Things like that. And instead of, why is my spouse picking up a fight with me always, you ask, what should I do to make our relationship work? You see the difference, right? We are getting closer to the problem and we are actually trying to find answers to resolve them. So we all introspect. So my ask is just shift your focus from asking why to asking what. That can make a lot of difference in improving your self-awareness. A book reference that I wanted to give you is Inside the Power of Self-Awareness in a Self-Deluded World by Tasha Eruch. There is also a TEDx speech by her. There's also some YouTube videos that you can watch out, and she will give the exact numbers and statistics behind the research. The second one I wanted to talk about is meditation. We all know the importance or the goodness of meditation. Rather than meditation, I would want to say this as spend time with you or spend time for you. It could be any activity, jogging, swimming, cycling, anything that gives you a private time, that gives a space for Mr. X to mingle with you or to make friend of you. Another perspective that I wanted to share is from a book called The Miracle Morning, where Hal describes some morning rituals for highly effective people. Most of you would have heard about this book. In fact, the first ritual he talks about is meditation. But instead of asking you to clear up your mind or asking you to try to get to a blank state, he insists that you can focus on a goal that you wanted to achieve for that day, which means you're doing a result oriented meditation that will help to set your mindset for the day. Now, so supposing you're involved or you're engaged in a certification preparation and you're studying a chapter, you're thinking about it and sleeping. The next day, I think you will have a mindset or you will have something targeted to be completed for that day. So just close your eyes for 10 minutes, first thing in the morning, and then bring that chapter to your mind and see how much you can recollect. See if you're getting any new thought patterns, any new ideas, or how much you can recollect and things like that. So which means you're already preparing your day, preparing your mindset, in fact, tapping your inner wisdom to help you with the preparation that you want to do that day. If not all days, at least just on those important days, like when you have a job interview or a presentation to make, I think it's a wise thing to do. Just take 10 minutes off in the morning and meditate with a goal in mind. You need not clear up. I think the challenge that most people have in meditation is we are not able to clear up our mind. There are so many distractions. Our mobile is so close to us. We have lots of things to worry about. So instead of that, just try focusing on one thing that is important for you that specific day. Try it out. Again, there are a lot of interesting videos and podcasts from Hal on these morning rituals. In fact, all the other 5, I think he talks about 6 habits. So the remaining 5 are also interesting to watch out if you have time. So the third step is visual thinking. So if we look back at our ancient civilizations before languages were born, pictures were used as means of communication. So we have seen all that drawings in the caves and carves, right? So we are all naturally tuned to grasp well with pictures. To add to it, we know how our left and right hemispheres of our brain functions. The left takes care of logic and reasoning, and the right holds our creativity, imagination, and insights. So they both can work in parallel. That's the good news, right? And that's why visual thinking is very powerful. It can complement your analytical thoughts in that knowledge space. So what is visual thinking? It is about thinking in pictures. See if you can visualize your thoughts and understandings about a specific topic and bring it out as a drawing. It will certainly help you to focus your attention, improve your comprehension and retention abilities. There are lot many books about visual thinking and visual leadership. I recommend you to go to Todd Church's Visual Leadership, Leveraging the Power of Visual Thinking in Leadership and in Life. Again, he's a TEDx speaker, and there are a number of online talks that he has given, which are very interesting about how he discovered visual thinking. I think he was assigned to a job in China, and he didn't know Chinese, and those people didn't know English, and they were drawing pictures, and somehow they got the work done. After that, he was inspired so much about visual thinking that he deep dived into the topic, and there he is advocating or promoting visual thinking. In fact, there was also a talk that was sponsored by IIBA Hyderabad chapter a couple of weeks ago, where Grant Wright from UK gave us some quick practical tips on how to go about visual thinking. I can ask Deepa to share you the link. That's a very interesting introduction or overview to how you can go about doing visual thinking. The final step is journaling or blogging, you can say. So penning down your thoughts can help you to bring shape to your thoughts. If you are a private person, it can also help you to vent out your fear and anxiety and thereby help you to improve your emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is very important parameter for self-awareness. If you are emotionally unstable, self-awareness or inner intuition is not going to work in your favor. So EI is another great area to explore. In fact, if you were in Madhavan's session a couple of weeks ago, where he delivered a webinar on giving us a quick introduction to emotional intelligence, he talked about personal and social competencies with respect to emotional quotient. That's again a very interesting introduction that you can watch out. I can ask Deepa to share the link in the chat window. And importantly, it can also notes taking or journaling can also help you to make note of all your ideas and creative thoughts, which are certainly gone if you lose them in that moment. Ideas and innovations emerge only when your thought patterns about a specific topic is concentrated. And once it is loosened up, it's all gone. In fact, that is why even in the morning miracles, when Hal talks about this meditation, result-oriented meditation, he always says that you have to keep a notebook and a pen nearby so that when your thoughts are concentrated about that topic, you might get some ideas that you should make a note of in the notebooks, because maybe after the meditation, it might just vanish. So it is, your ideas are very precious, and it deserves, I mean, the ideas deserve to be noted down and taken actions. So see if you can adopt to journaling or blogging or maintain your own version of personal notes or whatever that can actually help you to vent out your feelings or delivering your knowledge patterns and stuff like that. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. I'm going to quickly summarize here. We saw what personal knowledge management is. It is an individual's system of capturing, retrieving, and effectively utilizing the knowledge. We also saw about a research which said within an hour, 50% of your knowledge is lost, and in 70% in 24 hours, and in 90% in a week's time. And that's why PKM or personal knowledge management is very important for all of us to manage. And then I shed light on two discrete dimensions of knowledge: the know what knowledge or explicit knowledge, and the know how knowledge or tacit knowledge. I said somehow we are all emphasizing on explicit knowledge, but we should incline more to know how or tacit knowledge, because deep within us, our knowledge is rooted in tacit knowledge space. Then I gave you the 3 generations of knowledge management. The first one is emphasizing on the storage of explicit knowledge. We looked at the 4C methodology: collect, curate, crunch, and contribute, from cultivatedmanagement.com. And then I also gave you 4 techniques to improve your brain memory using spaced repetition, 50-50, topic demonstration, and sleep. We moved on to the second generation, where the focus was on the outer path of tacit knowledge. I introduce you to Secchi model: socialization, externalization, combination, and internalization. Further, we talked about the third generation, which focused on the inner path of tacit knowledge. I just surfaced upon some of the techniques that I thought would be helpful. This is a very intensive topic. Each of it would demand a webinar by itself. So I just touched upon introspection, meditation, visual thinking, and journaling. So that is all here. I thought I'll just give you an example from the web. If you just go and look for images under PKMS, under Personal Knowledge Management System, you will immediately find this. So this guy, I think every 2 years or 3 years, he's updating his personal knowledge management system in his blog. So he's nicely done it for his personal life and professional life, and within professional life, how what he's actually using for publishing and what he's using for his own what seeking or collecting category. And I think this is what I meant. This is what I meant when I said you have to design your own personalized. All these are just guidances for you, but you have to develop your own personal knowledge management. And I encourage all of you to go think about it and draft up something for yourself, because it is going to give you enormous benefits. We are all continuous learners, and that is why we are here. So just make the knowledge really work for you. Thank you. I can now take questions.
Thank you, Prashantini, for the wonderful webinar. I request all the panelists and attendees to put forward by raising your hand and typing your questions in the chat window. So we'll Prabha, Prabha, I can see you. Raise your hand. Can you please
You want to
share your
unmute
question?
them?
Yeah. You can also share your question in the chat window for others to see.
Okay. There is a notion what you consume in the early morning stays longer. Okay, is there any question, or I see another question coming from the Q&A? Okay, there's one question that I can take in the meantime. I saw it in the Q&A. So Kumar says there is a notion what you consume in the early morning stays longer. Any thoughts? Of course. And that is why we are talking about 6 habits of highly effective people. They are all coming under miracle mornings, right? There are enough and more evidences that morning is your highly effective time. Because before your family wakes up, or before you get into the busyness of your life, I think if you're able to get up early and spend like 2 to 3 hours for yourself, either you can research the topic that you're interested in or spend time for meditating or exercising, they're all going to be very effective. Definitely, Kumar. How do I manage to listen and take notes at the same time? So that is why I think in most of the cases they say it is better that you take handwritten notes. Don't use apps, or don't, I mean, though I say you should eventually digitize it and you should eventually have in a notes taking app, the best way is to do handwritten notes. Just come up with your own mnemonics, and there is also different methods of note taking. I can give you one example. Cornell notes taking method, which means you will draw a line 3/4 of the page, and you will just bring all the important points in the 3/4 of the page, and whatever you want to act upon. That's why I said mnemonics would help. So maybe if you say RV, then you're saying read for, RF is for read further, and then maybe AI, it's an action item for you, something that you've already found out and you can act upon that. So you can, when you do your activity, you find your own mnemonics that will work for you and have your own pattern for notes taking. So the more mnemonics and the more quicker way of able to take notes and handwritten notes, I think you will ace that.
Thank you, Prashantini. The next question is from Prabha Bhagwat Singh. What is the best software to store our information?
Okay, I think we gave some details about it. So there are several notes taking app like Evernote, Microsoft OneNote, and Google Keep. And if you're an iOS person, you can use Apple Notes also. But sometimes what I do is I digitize my handwritten notes. I scan them, I put it there. But if the documents are huge, I'm only on a free plan in Evernote. So what I do is I also use Google Drive or Dropbox and put all my documents there. And just in my Evernote, I nicely create a heading or a folder and just say that this is inside my Google Drive of this account, this personal email account, and these are the tags. So I just put the tags in my notes, whereas my actual PDFs or actual presentations are elsewhere in a document management system, and I point them there. So that is also an exercise. I mean, though these notes app are letting you have attachments, have audio recordings, you don't want to bombard it with so much of space thing, right? So I think keep only notes there. And if you want to give any references, any links or any attachments, I think you can use other document management softwares and just provide the link in your notes app, if that helps.
The next question is from Anthony Joseph. The best practice methodology for thinking, a plan towards passion and professional thinking space. So what is the best methodology to be followed in planning and thinking space?
There's there's no Anthony, there's no best. I think you have to explore and find for yourself. What I've given you is just a tip of the iceberg. I've given you an idea that something like this exists, but if you Google, you're going to get lots and lots of other frameworks and ideas. I would say visual thinking is good. I'm attempting it myself. I'm reading a book and then I'm trying to see if I can draw it out. You need not draw it perfectly, but I'm seeing if I can draw and express that to someone. I'm able to bring out a drawing and use that for communication. So you can try out a lot of things and see what works best for you. So there's no one that's why I said it's personalized. There's no one standard approach that is acclaimed as best.
Thanks, Prashantini. The next question is from Sundar Rajan. Yes, this question is applicable to all the certification aspirants who has this question. This is applicable to all technical certificate preparations as we initially feel overwhelmed. So, does personal knowledge management can be applied in a specific pattern for certification preparation? Is what he's asking.
Of course. See, personal knowledge management is a very generic thing. So however you want to do it for your own personal improvement, for your office research work, or how you want to engage your kids in their learning. So you can use these for anything. You have to design the framework, get some help, just Google it and you will have some reference models. I gave you a few, but you can find a lot of other things also. So see how you can design it for yourself and use these techniques in your certification preparation. So you can use this. So for example, I gave you this flashcards in a box method, right? So there are 50 techniques in Babok and it is overwhelming. We saw about it a couple of weeks ago. So just create flashcards for these 50 techniques and put them in one box. Give 2 days or 3 days intervals. See if you can move it to the third box. There you are preparing for the certification already. So I think it's only a mix and match that we have to do and find out what works for us.
Yeah. Thanks, Prashantini. The next question is, does the photographic memory helps us in learning a new skill?
The photographic memory is
Is it possible for one to utilize it to learn a new skill?
Yeah, if you have photographic, this attendee is anonymous. Maybe he has photographic memory. I don't know, but see, it's a rare skill. I wouldn't say everybody will have a photographic memory, but you can get to it. That's why I think we are talking about visual thinking. What we are doing in visual thinking is we are communicating with pictures, right? So the more and more we do, we get better in visual thinking. I think we will start looking at we are not seeing it in front of us, but we are able to visualize things. So what happens is deep within, you're making your neural connections work in favor of pictures and understanding pictures. So maybe that'll help you to improve your photographic memory. And maybe there are a lot of other things that you have to do. This subject is very huge. There are many projects around brain and how it functions. So I'm not at liberty to say that yes, you can develop that skill easily, but yeah, you can try, no harm. If you have photographic memory, nothing like that. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is from me, Deepa Sendil Rajan.
Yes,
Yeah.
Deepa.
So the approach is to solve any kind of dilemma or any situation which is tricky is to understand what it is and how to not why, right? So
Yeah.
how does observation as a skill which of BA helps in identifying that what? The next step, which is observation, which we get from socializing the tactical skill, which is generally the technique called observation, which we use as a BA. How
Yeah.
that will answer this what?
Okay, it might not be always observation. In fact, observation is not the second step of introspection. It has to be the other way around. Observation will be the first step. So maybe you're observing something and then you're impacted emotionally by it. So I think we talked about this asking why, and instead you have to ask what, very specific to self-awareness. So I wouldn't bring it to professional life, but if you still want to relate it, I think observe it from your team members or observe it from your other stakeholders. I think the second step is introspect, trying to find answers isn't what you can do to make that better, to maximize the value. So instead, if you're saying why this stakeholder is always grudging on it, why this stakeholder is, when I do a product demonstration, is always coming up with the last minute changes. So instead, if you change that question to what should I do to make her comfortable or to make him comfortable in the sprint or retrospective sessions, maybe something you can do beforehand, send her some notes or send her some links that will help her to get the context, or spend a private time with her before the actual sprint retrospective meetings happens, things like that. So you have to, I think we have this covered in stakeholder analysis and managing the stakeholder demands, right? So you observe
Yeah.
and take action per stakeholder to kind of handle them nicely. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is, what all can be possible as an incentive for learning apart from money, hike in income, knowledge, fame, reputation, career growth, etc.?
What all can possibly be? Okay. I don't see okay, I'm not saying these are not valuable, but I think knowledge should give you a feeling of satisfaction, a feeling of joy. So that is how you have to, I mean, it's something that you should be naturally inclined to. You will not be able to learn something because you will I mean, of course, there is an indirect agenda for doing a certification or doing an exam or projecting yourself as a knowledgeable person. But I think knowledge creation, the first step should come out of passion, of feeling good about knowing that detail. That's why I started with that story. So knowledge has
Yeah.
to be feeling good for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the quick recap, Prashantini. To the attendees and panelists, kindly put forward your questions. We have another 3 minutes left.
Prashantini Swami here. How do
Yes,
we
sir.
internalize? How do we internalize the knowledge management? I mean, actually, knowledge management. The moment knowledge management, generally we understand as kind of more of document management. That is the way we think through. But how do we internalize and put it into the practice so that I mean, in the information overload era, how do we just filter it and take what it is required and leave everything so that it is useful and we can put it into our daily practice.
Yeah. The reason is because we are all somehow inclined to explicit knowledge, and that is why you're saying whenever we listen to knowledge, when we think of it as an IT system or a software or something about document management. No, I think many of us, we would download a lot of PDFs or look at a lot of websites, but we don't even spend time in reading through and internalizing that within our mind to make best use of that knowledge. So documentation is different, or storing the knowledge is different, but what is important is changing that knowledge or converting that knowledge to tacit knowledge, or your own version or your own contextualization of that knowledge. So I think that's why I introduced you to the SECI model, where you will combine, you will talk to like-minded people, and whenever they share their experiences, you will articulate or bring back that tacit knowledge to explicit concepts, combine it as it makes sense to you, and then internalize is by practicing. So you have to practice it, or you have to talk about it, share and collaborate about it. So I've been reading about personal knowledge management for like 2-3 months now. So I thought the best way for me to test my knowledge around this is to actually share and collaborate that, and that's why I came on board. So I think you have to either experiment it or share, collaborate it. That's how you can internalize it.
Thank you very much. The follow-up question is, how do we then transfer the knowledge?
Transfer within you or to others?
Others. Once I internalize, so that,
Yeah, so this is a cycle, right? So initially you've been talking to few people, and then you've been gathering knowledge so that you become master of that. And after a time, I think we all have our own context to our knowledge. We are masters of our knowledge creation. So maybe take agile analysis for an example. So maybe you talk to some agile practitioners, you put together their thoughts, you conceptualize that, and then you combine them all together, and maybe you're getting, see, that is why different agile approaches are born. Today we have disciplined agile because there is a variation of agile. Previously we had Scrum, but now we have behavior driven agile deployment. So things like that. So they are variations. How those variations happen is because people are immersing themselves in their facts, and they are internalizing, and after internalizing they've got a new idea, or they've got a new perspective about that knowledge, and they come out with another better version, or a different variation of that. So then you start sharing it out, you start collaborating about it, you become a person who are sharing the experience. So the cycle goes on and on. So yeah, it's first maybe you're in the listening mode, then you're in the talking mode, and there are juniors coming up to listen and take it from you. Does that help, Swami? Yeah,
very much, very much. Thank you. I think Anthony has a question. He has raised his hand. Close.
He's posting, or he's going to talk?
Deepa, are you there?
Yes, Swami.
I think he has raised his hand. Okay, otherwise we can close. I don't
No,
know.
yeah. Actually, he has raised his hand. Can you please unmute him so that he could?
You want me to unmute? Okay, I'll do that. Just give me a minute. Just a minute.
Yeah. Meantime, the details of the speaker have been shared in the chat box. Please continue to raise questions regarding these topics, your queries to her LinkedIn profile through message chat or to her email. The details are provided in the chat.
Yeah, just in case I'm not able to answer Gaurav and the other anonymous attendee, I think please come to me in the private chat. I will be able to help you. Yeah.
I think he is. I made him to talk. He has to talk now. I think. Hello.
Yes, Swami.
Yeah. I think he has to talk. Actually, I think he's not talking. Some mic problem. I don't know. Okay.
I think Anthony can unmute himself.
Yes, he has to unmute. I asked him to unmute also.
Anthony?
Good evening, all. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Swami sir and the Chennai chapter for a wonderful session. It was really a lot of thoughts of coinciding. I just wanted to thank. And thank you to Prashantini ma'am. I mean, a lot of notes taking, that is what I keep practicing. And there were like Japanese tips given. So thank you very much and expecting more such sessions. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I'm done with it.
Thank you, Anthony. All right, so we can call it off then.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for your participation, and please watch out for upcoming seminars. I think we will soon have Deepa's webinar on cybersecurity analysis certification overview, and we have many more speakers coming up in the next couple of months. Thank you. Anything you want to add, Swami, Madhavan, or Ashok?
Nothing from me. Actually, congratulations for having this 5th year anniversary. Let us celebrate over the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Prashantini.